Okay, good evening. This is the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee of November 19th, 2018, and it is 7 p.m. And I would ask the clerk to call the roll. Thank you.
Alderman Karen.
Here.
Alderman Wiltshire is here. Alderman Lopez. Alderman Gidge. We also have Alderman OBrien, Alderman Tenza, Mayor Donchis, and John Griffin.
Great, thank you. Okay. I'd like to know if there is any public comment at this point in time. You may come to the front and state your name and address, and we're talking about ordinance 018-029. Oh, to pass out? Okay, thank you. We'll put it in the record. I like people who are organized.
Thank you. Sure. I'll get to him. I'll give it to you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And may we have an extra one for the record? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I
No,
need one for
yeah,
the
we need
record and
another one.
For me.
Yeah, one more.
One more?
One more. Thank you.
I got to turn this one in. Thank you. Good job.
For you. Thank you.
If you speak into the mic, give your name and address, please.
My name is Paul Boileau. I live at 20 March Street, which is in Ward 7 in Nashua. And this meeting is to increase the elderly exemption to offset the reassessment that went on this year. And right now, my current status, my old assessment was $213,700. It went up to $290,700, which is a 36% jump. And my real estate taxes, which we estimate, because I still have a mortgage on my home, and my real estate taxes are paid through my DCU account. So at the beginning of every year, we try to estimate what my monthly payments should be to my escrow account. Now, the first half of the year, there was no problem. My elderly exemption with my veterans exemption, I ended up with $269.36. After the reassessment, my last bill was $1,748.19. If you take away the $260 that we reserved for the payment for the second half, I now have a balance of $1,478. Everybody has a copy of that.
We have one
Thanks.
The question I raise is that being on a fixed income, where do I find these funds to meet my 2018, 2019 tax obligations? I got options. I can borrow the money and pay it back over time, which includes interest. I can rob my nest egg, but then that's what I'm currently using to pay my mortgage and real estate taxes right now. I can borrow from a relative, which is not optional. And I can find a job to pay off the loan with the possibility of maybe losing my elderly exemption status. The city's proposing phasing in a 25% increase on the exemption over a 2-year period. Now, not only do I have to repay the loan plus the interest for this year, but I must now increase my monthly contribution to my escrow account by at least $250 to cover the payments for the 2019 taxes. In summary, the city elected to implement 100% on the reassessment program rather than phasing it in. I believe that the same logic be applied to adjusting the elderly exemption. We expect the city to do the job right, the right thing, which is to finish what they started this year. We are now faced with a financial burden through no fault of our own.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that wants to speak? Please state your name and your address. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
my name's Larry Pike. I live at, does this work?
Yes, it's on.
I live at 17 Denise Street. It's Ward 1. I've spoken to Jan about the taxes and the elderly exemption. And my taxes went from in December of 17, let's see. Pardon me for not,
That's quite all
was
right.
100, my property was worth 194 a one. And this year with the increase, it went to 261, which is, I didn't put that percentage down, but that's quite a jump. What I'm concerned with, I put down the, that total 194 at the tax rate of 25.79, which is what it was last year. And that made that property be taxed at a full tax of $5,005. And then as it, this year, it went up to, if at that rate, but at 21, it went to, the tax would have been 5,535, which is about a 10% increase, which it's a little high for my, I'm on Social Security, you know, one fixed income is all I have, so I've never seen a 10% increase, but a 10% increase in this would have been, okay, I guess I could swallow that, you know? But when you take that tax and you take the elderly exemption away from those two numbers, I actually come out to, my taxes are going to increase from what it was to what I got to pay this year, 123%. So, you know, I wouldn't mind 10%, but 123 is, I don't think that, I don't think it was meant to be that way. I don't think that the city of Nashua would do 123%, but it did. So numbers-wise, my tax was last year 1,008, and now it's going to be 2,248. So naturally, it's got to catch up. So I got like a 17 and some odd $100 I got to pay to catch up with the first half, and then the second half, which is I normally put 500 into my escrow, so for each half, and to come up with 1,700 is very difficult for me. I don't make a lot of money. I don't have any investments or anything else, so it's and I just think that if the elderly exemption had gone up, well, I got another number to look at here too, which is my taxable income after last year, after the elderly exemption was 39,100. And this year, my taxable income is going to be 106,000, which, again, that's just a really big jump. So if the elderly exemption rose percentage-wise, you know, like the tax did, you know, we'd have to have that exemption somewhere around 210,000. If it was around 210, it would fall in line with the rest, and I would be paying an 11% increase, which, okay, it's still high for me, but 123% is just ridiculous. So I just think that the elderly exemption should be brought up higher. I did talk with Jan, and she said this is my first time here, so pardon me.
That's okay.
She said that it was, there was some plan to bring it up, but I didn't see by the numbers she was talking about that it's going to come anywhere near to do what's necessary for me, and it's just, I don't know how I'll come up with that, and I don't want to lose my house, but I guess if it comes down to selling it, I guess I will. The number of 261 for value, it's probably a little high, but I don't have a real problem with that for that area. I know that some houses have sold for near that, and so it's okay. It's just, and if the taxes like since the rate went from 25.79 to 21.21, it's kind of only brought it at the 10%. So, you know, whatever you guys did in line with that was not bad. So I don't have a complaint against that increase. It's high, but it's acceptable. It's just that in ratio to what I do, it's just very, very high. So I guess what I'd like to say is, please do raise that elderly number to, you know, if you're at 210 would be a number that would bring things in line percentage-wise. So I'm not sure what you guys got in mind for a number, but that's what I come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Salah Kiri, and I live at 111 Coburn Avenue, unit number 70. I have received a bill with before this proposal, and the bill is for us, my wife and I, we only live on fixed limited income, is very high. So I have a simple request that if we went with this, my taxes will go down, but I can't pay the bill that I have received. So I'm hoping that we will receive new bills after the adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing that we have no more public, Madam Clerk.
New business ordinances, we have ordinance 18029, increasing the exemption amount for the blind, elderly, and disabled tax exemptions by 25% total over the next 2 years. I will make a motion to recommend final passage.
As amended.
Oh. As amended.
Okay. You heard the motion concerning the ordinance 0-18-029. Alderman OBrien, would you like to speak on the amendment? And then I'll have the mayor and Mr. Griffin speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I bring forward an amendment to this ordinance, and what it will basically do in the amendment does everything what the original bill does. This bill was drafted by our late president, Brian McCarthy, and well aware to the issue that a lot of our citizens have brought up. The evaluation, unfortunately, which was mandated not by the city but by the state, and in recognizing did put like a strain on to our elderly people. There is currently right now around 600 people that do qualify for this particular exemption. The thing with this, they were looking, the bill itself, the main ordinance as written, will allow a 12.5% increase in 2 years to go towards the exemption. After the first year, there will be a rebate offered back to the elderly, or they could also apply it to the next year's bill if they so choose. But with the amendment now, again, to get back to the only thing that the amendment is doing, when you have people, just to keep the numbers easier, it was suggested instead of going up in the original ordinance and then to come up with a rate of basically in the example of $174,375, the intention was to round it up to $175,000. I think it would be easy to comprehend by our citizens and an understanding that, and make it a lot easier, particularly for our employees downstairs in assessing, and to explaining it to the elderly and everything. But basically, in splitting it up in the amendment, is there going to be any great loss? The answer is no. We're going to still hit the 25 percentile by rounding up. Basically, there's no loss. I think the target number, we're just about got a hit. I think Mr. Griffin can properly explain that, but it came up to be the best solution to do it, to round up the number and make it easier for everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Okay. Mayor, would you like to speak first, or would you like?
Sure, Madam Chair. So I'm here to support the idea of increasing the elderly exemption. Now, as you've heard, and I know we've been through this a few times, but for those who haven't heard it before, the state law requires that a revaluation be done every 5 years. Our last one was 2013, meaning this is the 5th year. And what a revaluation means is that all properties have to be brought to 100% of fair market value so that the assessment meets fair market value. Although we attempted to, because we could see what could happen here, we attempted to get a waiver and allow us to delay this. State DRA denied that and said that they would sue if we didn't proceed. And so what we found at the end of the day, the assessments were all done by KRT, who we hired to do this, is that there was a very wide range of results. I mean, and it, you know, some houses went up 30–40%, some went up 20%, some didn't go up at all. And but on average, you know, the residential market has been very strong. So on average, the average homeowner's assessment went up in the 22 to 23% range. So what we've proposed here is to increase the elderly exemption by approximately 25% in a two-step process over 2 years. Nashua already provides the largest elderly exemption of any city or town in New Hampshire. There's a sheet, if you compare it to Manchester, we're already considerably higher than Manchester. And what we're proposing here is that for people in the 65 to 74-year range, the current exemption is $155,000, meaning that the first $155,000 of assessment they pay no tax on. What's proposed here is that in the current year, that exemption be increased to $175,000, and that next year it increase again to $192,000. So it will go from, the exempted amount will go from $155,000 to $192,000. the amount on which no taxes need to be paid. For qualifying people 75 years to 79 years, the current exemption is 180,000. That would go to 203,000 in the current year, and to 224,000 next year. So again, the increase would go from 180 to 224, the amount that is exempted from taxes. And for persons qualifying people 80 years or older, the current exemption is 254,000. That would go to, the current exemption is 225,000. That would go to 254 this year, and would then go to 280,000 next year. So the increase would be from 225 to 280, the amount that would be exempted from taxes. And in answer to the question of what would happen this year, because the bills have already gone out, if the board acts and increases the exemption, we would contact homeowners and tell them that they would not have to pay taxes on the increase that takes effect this year, depending on, the amount depending upon their age category. That's what's proposed. For people, our elderly citizens, we want to make sure that they do as much as we can to enable them to stay in their homes. But in terms of the assessments, our senior citizens were affected like others. Some senior citizens didn't go up much at all. Some went up quite a bit, depending on the housing market, depending on how values of particular homes and neighborhoods were changed. Right now, under the current system, we provide about $3 million of tax relief to qualifying elderly residents, meaning if you add everybody's exemptions together, it is a subsidy, or however you want to call it, of a tax relief of about $3 million. Under the proposal that's before you, that number would increase from 3 million to about 3.75 million, or would increase about 700 and some thousand. I'm not pointing at the right number. Well, but 264 this year, and then 431 next year, for a total of 696. So it'd go from about 3,021,000 to around 3,700,000 in terms of the total amount of tax relief provided. And that's what we're proposing, and the effect of what we're proposing.
Okay. Alderman Lopez, did you have a question? for the
Yeah,
mayor?
so when we were talking about the veterans tax deduction last year, I was in favor of just implementing it instead of doing the phase-in approach. And it was explained to me that that's money that's spoken for in the budget, it's part of the existing budget. But this year, we're in a different situation because this is all happening because property values were revaluated. So this money that we're planning on phasing in, while cumulatively it does represent how much tax relief we're giving in a hypothetical sense, it's not actually money that we have in the budget right now that something would be cut for. Is that correct?
Well, the tax rate has already been set. So and it's been set based upon the assumption, this was set by the DRA, that we would actually collect all of this money. So if the exemption is passed this year, I mean, it is not covered by the tax rate. I mean, we would simply have to, if we didn't have a surplus at the end of the year, we would be in deficit at the end of the year. But assuming we generate a surplus of enough to cover this, then it would be covered, but it's not in the tax rate this year. That's the reason for the 2-year idea, that if we enact this now, the shortfall will be 264,000. If we did the whole thing, the shortfall would be 700,000 in the current year.
Alderman Lopez.
And so just to be clear, you don't think we'll have 700,000 of surplus?
We probably will, yes.
So we could implement the whole thing this year.
I mean, you could do the whole thing, you could do as much as you want this year. But the proposal here is to do it in 2 years. I mean, as usual, it is the balance between being fair to our elderly citizens, and we do provide the largest tax exemption already without an increase of any city or town in New Hampshire. It's the balance between trying to be fair with our elderly citizens and doing as much as we can, while on the other hand, being fair to other taxpayers. I mean, every dollar that we provide in tax relief to our elderly senior citizens who we want to provide in their homes, remain in their homes, is a dollar that some other family pays. So in trying to balance that out, it's never an easy balance to make. We've got young families. We want our elderly people to stay in their homes, and we have many elderly people who are paying zero taxes or a few $100s or $1,000. We've got young families who are struggling, who are paying $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 in taxes, and so it's you rob from one and rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. The revaluation does not bring in any extra revenue. All it does is reallocate the tax burden as between taxpayers. The total amount of revenue remains the same. So the board, I think, has reached up to this point a fair resolution. Again, the city of Nashua has the highest elderly property tax exemption of any city or town in New Hampshire. For example, for residents of who are 65 to 74, right now, before any increase, we provide $155,000 of exempted value. That's about, it's around between $3,500 and $4,000 per person, per property owner. Manchester provides $109,000 of property tax exemption for that same age category. And they also have lower income limits. So right now, we're about 45% higher than Manchester, and if we enact this proposal, we will go to not quite double what Manchester provides, but close. By next year. We will be at 192 and they're at 109.
Just to clarify, Alderman Lopez, I think we're already at the top for our veterans exemption. Aren't we at the 500 at this point in time?
We phased in the exemptions that we were doing instead of just allowing the same way that we're doing here. As the mayor says, we're going to provide more exemption as of next year. My question is, why not do it now, this year? We're going to do it next year. This year is the year that everyone's struggling to pay because they didn't foresee the issues with the revaluation. And that was the question I asked with the veterans, was if we were going to do it, why not just do it all? And it was explained to me that there would have to be cuts in the budget if we did that because the veterans tax benefit was on existing tax rates. So this is something we're going to do.
Okay.
The question is, are we going to provide the relief to our citizens now, or are we just going to delay it another year?
Okay. Mr. Griffin, can you clarify that? I thought the veterans exemption, that's only for veterans and they get up to $500. Is that doesn't have anything to do with?
Right, I think, as Alderman Lopez is pointing out, that was a phase-in approach a few years ago. As they expanded, the Board of Aldermen adopted the all veterans credit, and now it's, as you said, Madam Chair, 500. That's already in. It's already in the tax rate
Right.
of 2121. What the mayor is saying is to kind of smooth the burden on everyone and provide tax relief to the elderly. And as Alderman OBrien said, we rounded off to the nearest 1,000, so that's very easily understood. as the mayor said, it's going to be about $265,000 provided as immediate tax relief to the elderly. That how we'll do it is in the form of an abatement. So we'll abate that amount of value, and we will charge, they kind of end up in the same place, but we'll charge the overlay account for $265,000 because the bills have already been rendered. To further what the mayor was saying is several elderly folks have called the tax office and the assessment office. To the extent this is moved for final passage tonight and passed next week, our assessing folks will get a letter out to the elderly that qualify, the 600 that Alderman OBrien had mentioned, and try to catch them before they pay their total bill. So if we catch them, they're going to pay less. On their bill, we'll abate it. If they've already paid, some come in the very next day and pay, we'll give them a refund. So those are the ways we're going to get the money back to the individual elderly qualified taxpayers sooner rather than later. So that's why and you were very respectful in getting this meeting tonight instead of waiting into December. So we're trying to, time is important to everyone, and that's how it will be implemented. So the individuals, once again, the individuals that have called those two offices, we're trying to tell them, wait and see. We're trying to work on it as expeditiously as possible.
Okay, so they're not going to be penalized because they're waiting for that letter to come out from the assessing, because it's what, December? Somebody said it was December 7th, but I thought it was December 14th is when
You're absolutely correct, Madam Chair. December 14th is when the bill is due. So hopefully with this positive movement tonight and a full board approval next Tuesday, everyone will know, or the following Tuesday, it's 27th.
Okay.
That
So,
will-
okay, so gentlemen, you understand what we were just saying, that you don't have to run down and pay your bill. Okay. You'll have to wait, Mr. Boileau. Okay, thank you. Anything else you'd like to add, Mayor or Mr. Griffin?
I would just add that in terms of the size of the current exemption, I compared it to Manchester, but they are number 2. That's how much we're ahead of number 2. If we compare it to Concord, the difference is far greater. Where is Concord? Concord is sort of the third largest city. They are 5th. So, as you go on down the line, the other cities in New Hampshire all are less than Manchester, which is what I gave you the comparison on.
Okay. And we also have to realize that several years ago, we did do a small exemption along with the veterans increase. So it's not like it's been a while since we've done that. Okay, do we have Alderman Lopez?
Can I make a motion to implement the full plan instead of phasing it in?
You can.
So just amend the existing legislation so that instead of the 2-year approach, we just do it all this year, and then we implement the rapid time frame. We don't confuse anybody next year when they're paying their bill too, and hopefully, people who were caught unawares with this and they're on a fixed income, where being number 2 or number 3 or number 4 in the state doesn't matter to them, the actual cost of their bill matters, they can get some relief this year instead. Because with the veterans, now everybody's looking at it as, oh, that's always been like that. It was never phased in. It was. And now it's not hurting us. So I feel like the sooner we do this, the better it helps people, and the sooner we're all used to it within the city budget.
Alderman Wilshire?
Could I ask the impact again if we implemented the whole 25% this year, please?
So as the mayor stated, it's a $265,000 amount coming out of the overlay this year. Next year, when the full effect is in, assuming no increase in exempted amount, no increase in the tax rate, it's $432,000. So if you add the two together, that's the $697,000 impact over 2 years. So it would be an immediate $430,000.
To do it immediately, it's 696. That's the answer.
Thank you.
Okay. Alderman OBrien?
Thank you. I would like to speak to Alderman Lopez's motion there, although I feel quite admirable. But one of the most esteemed and respected people on this board was Alderman McCarthy, and I think if he could have come up with a one-year solution, I know he would have. So why did he piecemeal it? Why did it go 12.5%, and why did it go 12.5%? And I think if I may glom on to the mayor's example, we are talking about a potential rob Peter to pay Paul. By giving this exemption, the city of Nashua, we still got to get snowed on, we're going to need a fire truck to replace, cruisers and the like, and textbooks for our student, and that comes from the tax dollars. So whenever we grant any exemptions, whether it be veterans, which is well-deserved, or the elderly or the blind, which is well-deserved equally as well, to be a benevolent society, but it is borne by the average taxpayer. So I like the 12.5 and the 12.5 unless the mayor throws his support into it. I'm just on the side of caution that is too big of an apple. Though noteworthy, I'm just hope it isn't going to be too big of an apple to come up with the cost.
Alderman Lopez and then Alderman Wilson.
I mean, as it was said earlier, we may just have this in our surpluses, period. So I would not want to rob Peter, who is the current taxpayer who's going to have trouble paying for their increased tax rate, in order to pay for a hypothetical Paul, which might come down in the future. I think we need to pay attention to what people are saying right now. And when we say your typical taxpayer, we're just talking about the typical taxpayer now. The elderly have been the typical taxpayer their whole lives. So they've put a lot into the city. They've invested a lot into it over the years and been the typical taxpayer. And I think it's wrong to just say, well, they can't afford it, they can't afford it. They could move to Manchester and it's cheaper there.
Alderman Wilshire.
I don't think anyone's saying that. And as one whose taxes went up considerably, my own, I would err on the side of caution as Alderman OBrien and phase this in over 2 years. It's coming. It's gonna happen. And I don't think we're, I think we're pretty generous with it. And did they expect this big increase? No, neither did I. I got one of the biggest increases of anybody, I think, sitting in this room. So, and I do think we should give the 12.5% per year so that we don't take a hit on the budget.
Alderman Tenza.
Thank you. Can I just ask, what happens if we finish the budget year and don't have a balanced budget? Do we just draw from the reserves then, or are we in deeper trouble at that point?
John Griffin, CFO, as we try to do annually, we always embed some surplus revenue in the budget. We do that for a number of reasons, but most importantly, that we have a balanced budget. So the last several years, we've had $4 to $5 million of surplus that we've applied to the tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, the important note here is that $4.5 million of surplus applied to the tax rate to get it down to $21.21 per thousand. So I'm optimistic that we won't have a budget deficit, but I do know that the overlay is in the rate. So it's really, everything's included, budget, overlay, to come up with the tax rate as set by the Department of Revenue Administration. So that's my way of adding a little bit of comfort that we're not going to have an unbalanced budget.
But I think the answer to that is, if the surplus is less, then there's less to apply to the tax rate. So to the extent you spend 700 now, next year's tax rate will be $700,000 higher. Because the surplus will be less, there will be less to buy down next year's tax rate. So if it's phased in over a couple of years, then that is phased in gradually. If it's done all at once, then next year, people will pay immediately when the 2019 tax rate is set.
Alderman Tenza, did you have a follow-up?
If I may, Madam
Certainly.
Chair, thank you. And from what I remember from our conversations about the overlay, that's at a healthy level right now, but certainly it's at a level where it allows the city to borrow at a lower rate and to keep the city at a good economic position, correct?
Well, maybe, but of course, we've just put a revaluation into effect. We don't know what abatement requests we'll get. And we don't know how much it will take to settle those, if anything. You can expect that commercial taxpayers, I mean, they sort of routinely file abatement requests every year.
Sure.
Residential people don't tend to do that, but we don't know, we don't know how the abatement requests are going to go with respect to all these new values.
Anyone else? I can understand your concern, Alderman Lopez, but where we're moving this forward, and City Hall has been getting phone calls concerning paying their taxes. Most of these people will have gotten a letter, once this is approved, changing that status for them, because the exemption will have changed. And then obviously, come 2019, when they send out the bills in April, May, that exemption will already be on there. So I don't think making that amendment to give the whole 25% at this point in time is really the right thing to do. I think that everyone that put this ordinance together really talked about it in great length, and I think that I have to respect what they're trying to do, and also to make sure that the city is safe in what they're proposing for the future that's down there. Alderman Lopez.
So I understand the positions that have been put out. I'm conscious of the crisis that we have in terms of a lack of affordable apartment units. I'm fully aware that fixed income hasn't gone up at all. So while I understand the positions being presented, I did make the amendment. So can I ask that it be voted on by roll call?
Absolutely. Would you like to repeat the?
So, excuse me, you made a motion, Alderman Lopez,
It
to,
was to amend the existing proposal to implement the full elderly exemption and blind exemption this year instead of phased into 2.
so that's the motion. Motion is to,
Yes.
instead of phasing this in, to do the full 25% this year.
Okay. Okay. wait a minute. Alderman Gidge.
Everything is a balancing act. This is really hard right now with the revaluation. I understand where Alderman Lopez is coming from. Having said that, this is here. This is something that can get done. This is something that can basically sort of take effect now. I understand that everybody would like a little bit more or a little bit less. This, I've seen a lot of seesaws balancing act, is really good. Changing any of it, it just changes everything. So I would say that if we're voting on an amendment, if you do, I would vote against it. If you, that's the process. I will vote for this the way it is. It always could be better. There always could be more. But this is very well done.
Okay, Alderman Lopez has asked for roll call vote on the amendment to fund this exemption in 25% for 2018. Would you please call the roll?
Alderman Karen,
No.
Alderman Lopez,
Yes.
Alderman Wilshire is no, Alderman Gidge,
No.
and that motion fails.
Okay. So we're back to the motion for final passage of O-18029 as amended. Do we have any conversation on that? This is the amendment rounding off, but, the numbers. Alderman Lopez.
Just to be clear, I'm obviously going to take what I get here and vote in favor of the amendment. I was just playing for all of it because I think there's a lot of people in the city who could benefit from an immediate action being taken.
And Alderman Lopez, I don't think anyone disagrees with you, but I think that, as Alderman Gidge said, people have worked on it, and this is what's being presented, and to start making those kind of major changes could affect us.
I'm
when we
just
bring it
clarifying, I'm
forward.
not going to be petty.
No, oh, absolutely, Alderman Lopez, I know that, but I thank you. Okay, so, anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of O-18029 as amended?
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay, motion passed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Madam Chair.
Okay, do we have any public comment, gentlemen? Yeah, Mr. Boileau, you need to come to the microphone, please. State your name again.
My name is Paul Boileau. I live at 20 Mark Street. And the only question I have is, how is this process going to be implemented? I know but my taxes are paid directly. When my bill goes to the DCU, my mortgage holder, they pay that tax right away. They
Okay.
don't hold it. So how is the city going to proceed with the abatement?
Okay, so, Mr. Griffin, could you maybe give him a simple explanation?
For those
you.
that have already paid the tax bill, they'll get a check. They'll get an abatement check payable to the taxpayer.
So you don't send it directly to my mortgage, the people who pay my real estate taxes?
I think the taxpayer, you may want to get a direct check if you instruct the tax collector
Well,
to
no, I
send
don't
it.
want a direct check.
So if you want to send it to the mortgage,
Right.
to your escrow account, that can be done as well.
So now I have to sit down and figure out what, what the outcome of this, I do have a spreadsheet that I use to try to figure out what it is I'm gonna end up paying. So right now, we're looking at 203,000 rather than 180. And then the rest of it will come next year, is that right?
Correct.
That'll be for the entire year
So
next year.
if that would be for the following year, that's correct.
Because next year I go from class 2 to class 3, because I'll be 80 years old in March.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you for hearing us out.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay, any remarks from the alderman? Alderman Tenzer?
Just a congratulations on a very successful senior lunch yesterday to the city and Alderwoman Karen. I was happy to attend my first one.
To officially the June Karen senior outing.
Nice.
And if I may echo my sentiments exactly, first time there and enjoyed myself. Thank you.
I think everyone did. And I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much turkey. Do we have a motion?
What's the point of
Oh,
Thanksgiving
okay.
if you can't eat too much? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned at 7:49. Thank you, everyone. You're going to put that away?
Yeah.
Okay.